Thank you, Valerie, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Yeah, it's great to be here today. So the talk today, I'm going to be talking about empowering people for safe water management, and there's going to be three tools for that. I'm giving away the punchline of the presentation at the beginning here: awareness, education, and resources. So we'll get to that in a bit. All right, first a little bit about myself. So my name is Carl Zimmerman. I'm a PhD student in environmental engineering at University of British Columbia in Vancouver. I'm doing one of those PhDs that lasts forever. You know, I'm rounding off my 5th year now, but hopefully we're moving on soon. There's really been kind of three areas, three kind of segments, I like to say, that I've had the privilege of being a part of during my PhD. So the first kind of 4 years was typical lab-based science engineering, working with biological ion exchange and doing the gene sequencing and chemical analysis and trying to understand the chemistry and the biology and really just the science of water treatment. Through that period, I also had some really interesting opportunities to work with Indigenous communities with an organization called CentrEau. And with those experiences, I learned that safe water solutions are more than just a technology, but need to involve an understanding of the culture and history of the community where they're being designed. And so understanding that, I kind of came to find an interest in a social sciences perspective of community drinking water solutions. And that's where I devised the Tools for Water Partnership study, which is what we'll be talking about today. Okay, so to keep you interested and awake and tuned in until the end, well, if you stay tuned, I'll show you at the end a video of why we owed this kind man a beer. All right, we'll start today. We'll start this talk with kind of an introduction to water, sanitation, and hygiene, which we call the WASH sector. So we'll start the kind of history of this with the United Nations Millennial Development Goals, the MDGs. And that was from 2000 until 2015. And so the 7th MDG on environmental sustainability contained the target for water and sanitation. So the MDG 7 sought to halve the proportion of people without sustainable access to safe drinking water and basic sanitation. Okay, so what did the world do towards MDG 7? We built improved infrastructure. And now improved is a key word here because there's definitions of what were unimproved and what were improved water sources. And basically, we're trying to build improved sources. And improved, you can encourage you to go Google it, and Google Images will give you many examples. But basically, improved was some type of infrastructure to protect the water from contamination, keep it safe from the source to the house. But it was largely focused on infrastructure, improved infrastructure. So in 2015, kind of the wrap up of the MDG, the Millennial Development Goals, the reports came out and showed that 91% of the population was using improved water sources. And this was a big success from the metrics of the MDGs. However, even before that, there was some discussion starting to happen that improved water was not necessarily safe water. So improved was not necessarily, it often did, but in some cases, improved water sources were not effective at reducing the burden of illness. So in 2015, when the United Nations released the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's the era that we're under still today, the terminology was changed to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. There's also the whole side of the sanitation and hygiene, which is a very important and parallel to this story, but today we're just going to be focusing on the drinking water side. But happy to share stories later on about sanitation as well. So under the United Nations, safely managed had a definition, of course. So safely managed means 3 things. First is that the water is available on the premises, it's available when needed, and it's free from contamination. And there's 3 things that constitute contamination: fecal coliform, arsenic, and fluoride. This is safely managed water. The 2020 reports from the Joint Monitoring Program showed that still 2 billion people lack access to safely managed water. And our goal is that by 2030, everybody in the world has safely managed water and sanitation. So there's still some progress to go. All right, an activity here. So in the chat box, everyone wake up and get your keyboards going. I'm wondering if anybody can or share your thoughts on what is the difference between improved and safely managed drinking water systems. So the difference between what's an improved system or safely managed. Give people a couple seconds. This is probably a 1 sentence or 2 sentence answer.
Hello. Maybe improved would mean there is a better access at the time they need, but it's not necessarily safe.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Anybody else have comments? Write in the chat or see.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
My name is Zita. I think safely managed drinking water systems means it is safe. That is no bacteria in this water. So it is safe for the health of people. But improve, I think it is based on technologies, how effort people use to have access to this water.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, good. You're getting at some good distinctions there. Maybe one other person want to share? All right, that's okay. I'll jump in. Okay, yeah, excellent. Very, very good. So it's important to kind of distinguish, yeah, between improved, which was largely around the, oh, here we got one more in the chat box. So somebody said, improved is when you already have water and that we can put mechanisms in place to improve it. Safely managed is that the water is safe for human consumption. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, so people, you're definitely getting at the definition of safe water, which is perhaps different than improved infrastructure. So I've got a couple pictures here that kind of show the ladder of service. So if we go from an unimproved source, this is the bottom service, this could be just an open well. Basically, nothing is protecting or stopping contamination. You can get surface runoff with feces from cows or sheep. I've even heard stories of people dumping cats into wells to poison them. I don't know if that was true or not, but somebody did tell me that. So that's unimproved. The second level could be improved. So this was, for instance, a protected borehole. Improved sources, this largely focuses on the infrastructure itself, preventing contamination, keeping it clean from the source to consumption, including in the household. However, safely managed water involves a system. It could be a management committee is an excellent way of managing safe water, but a system of making sure the sustainability. So not just you need to have the improved infrastructure, but also somebody looking after it, keeping it clean, which might involve collecting fees to hire somebody to keep it clean and maintain it and have pools of money ready when it needs repairs. So, and many other things as well, but that's safely managed water. So now a question comes up, is what is the role of international actors in international development? And I'd like to start this section with a quote from Paul Collier and the book, The Bottom Billion, which is becoming perhaps a little bit outdated, but I think very relevant to our field. So the quote goes that change in societies at the very bottom must come predominantly from within. We cannot impose it on them. So now let's look at understanding that change needs to come from within. Let's look at the kind of paradigms of development and how we get towards supporting people to create that change from within. So it's kind of, I like to break down into 3 paradigms, and we're currently entering and trying to understand how to make the third one successful. But starting at the beginning is what I like to call the import model. And so this era was focused on rich countries importing technologies and infrastructure, improved infrastructure to help poor countries. Yeah. However, there's decades of findings and studies on this, and around the world, there's lots of examples of abandoned infrastructure. So this shows that when you're just importing infrastructure, people don't understand why they need to use it, and there's no safe management of that or management committees to ensure that when it breaks down, it gets repaired. These often get abandoned. So then the next kind of paradigm that I like to describe gets towards empowering the communities for action, but it's what I call the strings attached model. So under this kind of approach, international organizations might give resources, whether that's training, capacity building, or running workshops, or largely financing. They'll give these resources to local NGOs to carry out development. However, that development projects have strings attached. They're largely designed by the international actors or the donors themselves. For instance, here's $15,000 to implement this specific type of technology, or here's money to run workshops about this approach, right? The approach and the technology and the workshops are largely still being designed by the funding agency or the international actors, but it's the local NGOs carrying them out. So it's better. We're getting towards it. However, what I've learned from stories and asking the local actors, what did you find leads to sustainable outcomes? The answer everybody talks about is what I like to call the partnership model. So this is partnering and empowering local communities to do the projects in the way that they see, they already know how to create sustainable, long-term, safe water solutions. So this can involve aligning with existing domestic priorities, asking the local organizations what support they want to do the projects that they think are needed, and then collaborating to develop a local safe water solution. So now the question, why partnerships? So localizing a solution requires expertise from a diverse background. So importantly, it requires input from the water users themselves who uniquely understand the history, the culture, what has worked in the past. You know, they understand which rivers run dry first in the summer and which rivers flood. They understand if people prefer groundwater versus surface water. All these things are so important and can only come from involving the community members. But you also need a lifetime of experience with public health, whether this, from a background in medicine, or even understanding what some of the challenges have been in that local region. But you also need technical expertise, whether this in the engineering and design of the actual technology, or understanding local construction methods or supply chains. You need information on policy, right? All these different people need to come together to work together to create a locally appropriate safe water solution. And it's a water partnership that unites this expertise on the same team. Okay, so the rest of this talk, we're going to be looking at what are the tools to build these water partnerships. But first, I'll introduce the study that I've had the privilege over the last 2 years of being a part of. So, tools for water partnership study. The main research question we have is looking at what approaches can empower a water partnership towards sustainable water solutions. And so the underlying ideas here is that water solutions and technologies are going to be specific to each community and location. And those don't necessarily, you can't copy and paste technologies. However, the approaches to building trusting partnerships, that's more universal. That's based on trust, which is in human nature. So over the last year, I've visited with local organizations and communities around the world and had some really amazing experiences. And so as part of this, I've been in most locations, I'm kind of hosted by a local NGO, which is maybe, has 5 to 15, maybe 20 employees and field staff. But that I'm meeting with the local, these aren't international NGOs, these are organizations of people who've grown up and continue to live and work in their own communities. And through these visits, I get to meet with those NGOs themselves, but also other water stakeholders. So community, like household members, the chief, if there's a water utility, the local government, regional government, national ministers, international actors, churches, schools, all these different people who are involved in community water projects. And in these discussions and water chats with stakeholders, the discussions go in many ways, but I like to kind of pull out three themes here. The first one is, who are the key water stakeholders? Second, what are the roles for each stakeholder? And the third is, what tools ensure that everybody can participate in managing their water? All right, let's jump back to the SDG paradigms. So remember, we want to get to safely managed water. And safely managed water requires participation by all these stakeholders who bring their various expertise. And that's facilitated through a partnership. However, a partnership requires that stakeholders are empowered. They have, there's a certain amount of knowledge and getting on board that's needed so that people can participate. And that's what the next few slides we're going to share examples of how to empower people. So first, as I mentioned, one of the questions that I think is important to ask is, who are the important water stakeholders? So I'm going to list, there's about 12 of them here. I'm going to list them and then I'll highlight about four or five to explain more in depth. So you have chief and regional government, national government. I'll also indicate that the width of the line in this diagram indicates the kind of relative importance that people have placed in discussions, like largely around the frequency of how often these people are mentioned as important stakeholders. Okay, so you have your mayor and government, donors, technical experts, NGOs, private sector, water users themselves, and especially women as water leaders. The technical repairs persons, schools, health professionals, and the water management committees. Okay, so there's a lot of stakeholders here, and there's a lot of information and stories behind this. I'll highlight just a few here today. The chief or mayor, that's a very important role. So most people trust their mayor or their chief for a lot of different matters. So they trust that the chief has the community's best interests in mind and at heart. And so they'll trust whoever the chief endorses. So one of the roles of the chief is to be the first point of contact for outside organizations. And that outside could mean international, but it could also just mean from outside that community. It can mean from the next community over or the next state over. So the first point of contact to understand if this outside organization, if their interests align with the community's interests, and then if so, if the chief endorses that partnership, the people are very likely to support it as well. The national government has a role to create an enabling environment. That's a terminology that came out to kind of support and encourage participation by international, but also domestic actors. But the national government also has a role to listen to the regional and municipal governments and the people within their country, and to create the national priorities for water and sanitation, and to share those national priorities and invite actors, international and domestic actors, to address those national priorities, but kind of in a concerted and focused effort. Private sector, this was an interesting one that came up around the importance of creating, in this case, it might be supply chains. So what incentives can encourage hardware stores, for instance, to carry spare valves and tubes and lamps. Water users are involved in important to share the history and the local context, also to share what their preferences would be for a water solution, but also to participate in managing the water and water management committees. Schools and health professionals, say the nursing station, they have an interesting role in the community as well. So people trust, say, their nurses for matters about health. So much more than if I came into a community and started trying to teach matters of health. People already trust their nurses and doctors. So if you can bring those health professionals into a water partnership, and perhaps they can share information about waterborne contamination and its impact on children's health. People trust their nursing and doctors at the nursing station. All right, we'll jump back to the quote from Paul Collier that change must come from within. And so the next quote that I'm going to share is what I like to call the most important quote from the WASH sector. And so this is kind of a translation of the quote you're seeing now on the screen into the context of water and sanitation. And this quote I've heard almost exactly word for word in many different languages on many different continents. And it goes, people understand their water challenges, but they also understand their water solutions. People understand their water challenges, but they also understand their water solutions. And this means that people are willing and able to participate and to champion managing their safe water. However, people aren't born ready to participate and make decisions. So there's kind of a certain level of empowerment and getting people up to speed to enable them to then participate in water management. And so through discussions with organizations and water leaders around the world, we kind of come to, I like to group it into 3 sequential tools to enable people to participate in managing their water. The first is awareness. So awareness of what are waterborne contaminants, and awareness of the connection between water contamination and, for instance, your children getting sick. So the connection between water and health. And once people understand are aware of the importance of safe water, then you often hear, well, what can I do about that? So then that's where the second step comes in, and that's education. So education of what are the safe water sources in your community and what are the less safe sources. Education of what are the treatment options, whether that's a household level filter or a community kiosk. So when people are aware of the water challenges and also educated on what are some of the possible solutions, I like to say that's when people are motivated to find a solution. And then the third step is resources. So that could be financial, it could be training, it could be permissions. And so when people are motivated and given the resources, that's when they're empowered for action. And so I've got a quote here from the manager of an NGO, and I'll read this out and then we'll break it down a little bit. So they say, it's trying to help people to understand, this is the problem we have, how do we get out of it? And we do that through triggering and training, which is helping the community to identify their problem and then to solve their problems. And after the training, then we do the distribution of technologies. So this person is talking about building awareness, triggering, helping the community to identify the problem. They're talking about education through training and understanding how to solve their problems. And then resources, which in this case was a technology distribution, but it could also be capacity building. So the next few slides, I want to share examples with pictures of strategies for awareness, education, and resources. So arsenic is an invisible contaminant in water, and it creates these painful, they call them impressions, they're little pits in the hands and feet of people, and they're incredibly painful, and people try to cut them out. And they come from arsenic, which is an invisible contaminant. So one of the strategies for building awareness is connecting unsafe water and contaminants to your health. So understanding that invisible contaminants, even if your glass of water looks clear, that could still be what's responsible for, in this case, these little impressions or your children's diarrhea or whatnot. Another effective way of understanding these contaminants is to visualize them, especially invisible contaminants. An example could be teaching people to use a simple fluoride test to test their water, and then this one turns either pink or yellow, depending if there is or is not fluoride in the water. Another really cool test that I learned from these gentlemen in rural India was around using guava leaves. I've heard papaya also works, but guava leaves, in the presence of iron in the water, they turn black. And you could really see in this picture, there's different levels of water and there's different stages of filters or different water. So these are two strategies to visualize water contaminants. And after people are able to start testing their water and understanding the safe and unsafe water sources, an excellent way of capturing that to build awareness is with community maps. So you might work with a village elder to create the map itself and then overlay that information with the water tests of what sources are safe and unsafe. And that can be posted at a school or a daycare center, somewhere central in the community. Now, once people are aware of their water challenges, they often ask, okay, what do I do? So this is where you can come in and provide demonstrations of possible household filters or community kiosk filters. The bottom left is a workshop on the biosand filter, which is an incredible household level filter. And one really good strategy for providing education and letting people see what a solution might look like is visiting model homes. So in every community, you have the people who are the first ones or the early adopters to say, yep, I want to try that. Give me a filter. I'll try it out, or I'll improve my latrine. And so by asking those people to invite their fellow community members and people from other communities to come visit their house and to learn and ask questions, what does it look like? Are you happy with it? Do you notice it has helped your family? How much does it cost? And so a good quote here is, you can go to another community and see a new hand washing facility. And when you see that in another community, that can help you learn so that when you go back, you can do the same in your village. All right, and then the third step, the final one, is resources. So this might be knowledge or training, it could be finances, political support, or permissions. Many more stories here. The top right picture is about a village savings and loan association. This one's in Uganda, which is an excellent tool for pooling resources and creating economic empowerment opportunities. The bottom one is around training of mechanics to repair pumps. Okay, to summarize the last few slides, we had 3 tools to bring people up to speed to then participate in managing their water. First one was awareness of locally relevant contaminants and their safe and unsafe sources. Second one was education about what are the options for safe water. And the third one was providing resources to take action. The last kind of results that I want to share today is around how to build trust between stakeholders. And this is a whole field I'd be happy to talk further, but I'm going to kind of go through it quickly here because, yeah, I'm happy to talk more maybe in the question period. And what's really important, and I think one of the most powerful things about a water partnership is that it's shifting who or what is being trusted. So by creating partnerships, you're asking people to trust the other team members who are real people with personalities and characters and that you can talk to and build trust in. Instead of when you just import technologies, you're asking people to trust this concrete or plastic or steel box that's supposed to treat their water. And so that's the power of water partnerships. So we need to build trust. And so some of the things that were identified on how to build trust are long-term relationships, respecting local capacity. This could be, if there's somebody who's trained locally to design and fabricate, you don't need to import somebody from another country to do that. Trust the local capacity. Adhering to local languages and customs. Aligning with trusted people, that might be the church or a community action board or somebody in the community who's existing trust. In-person engagement. Introduced by local representatives. I have many stories on how that can be successful. And then most importantly is having transparent objectives. So the whole water team who's working on this project, sitting down and explaining like why are they involved? What do they want out of this? I've heard examples of teams who they suspect that the international actors have financial incentives that they're not sharing, and then that really impedes trust. Okay, takeaways. Remember the most important quote from the wash sector? People understand their water challenges, but they also understand their water solutions. In addition to more than importing technologies, we need to create partnerships to find localized water solutions. And people can be empowered to participate in these water partnerships. There's 3 steps: awareness, education, and resources. And so when we put all this together, it's important to frame yourself as on the same team. And to do that, when you start a project, you can ask, who are the important stakeholders? What are their roles? And how do we include everybody? Okay, so at the beginning, I told you I explained why we owed this man a beer. So the story is from Madagascar, which was one of my first trips in a beautiful country. But it has absolutely the worst roads in the world. And so we spent 3 days going about 170 kilometers, averaging about 8 kilometers an hour. And we were frequently getting stuck. And in many of the areas we'd get stuck, we'd either have to dig our own way out or use trees to kind of fill in the holes. If we're lucky, we might be in a village and people could help us out. So here's a video, and here's this man that really gave himself to the cause. And there we go. So anyways, yes, all the gentlemen in this village helped us get out of our mud hole in this case. And this wasn't the first and it wasn't the last time we were stuck, but we did thank them and compensate them for their help. And Madagascar has absolutely the worst roads in the world. I've been on some bad roads. Nothing is as bad as Madagascar. All right, there's far too many people to thank, so I'll just for a second put these pictures up here. But really, I'm so thankful to all the people who've hosted me and helped me along this journey and who've taken the time to share their stories with me. And the last slide I'll leave you on, everybody I meet, I ask this exact same question in various languages. What is the most important person or thing to keeping water safe in your community? Here's a word cloud with some of the answers that I get. So thank you, everybody, and I'm happy to chat further.